Politicians don't understand people who do good simply because it's right. It makes them nervous.
Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Wednesday. It is the last day of July the 31st, and we are rolling live right now on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. You guys can also join us on X. You can join us on YouTube if you like censorship and you want to do that. We're also on Locals, and for right now, Locals is only the first 30 minutes of the show, so you guys can easily click through, but that's at kyleseraphin.com if you want to redirect to our Locals page and join the community over there. We're going to put some stuff that's behind the scenes. We're going to continue to share there, and when we hit 100 people behind it, then we will be able to do the full show over there too, so you guys can join on that. I want to thank all of you guys for getting in this morning. It is a weird Wednesday. I always say that because it's alliterative and I like the way that it sounds, but it's a weird day. And we started the week off knowing that this is the plan of attack, that the word weird is out there. So before we get too deep into it, I want to plug my friends over at Catholic Vote. And here they are. And we did an episode of Between the Lines. It's the final episode of Between the Lines before we take on our new skin. We're going to doff the one sort of old scaly, and we're going to take on something new. You guys are going to see. It's a similar program, but we've got some additions to it. So if you guys want to support us at Catholic Vote, social medias, it's at Catholic Vote. If you go to their website, it's catholicvote.org. You can do catholicvote.org/theloop or /loop, and you'll get access to an excellent email service that they do, which is full of news. Today, the most interesting story there that I'm not covering is a Secret Service whistleblower predicting another shooting. It's a leaked email. It's a counter sniper basically saying that he expects another attempt. And I'll tell you why that is a little bit later on today, because I do know why that is. But it's worth noting, Catholic Vote, great folks, keeping us going. And kind of more interestingly, maybe to you, is we did another take on the word weird and a Christian perspective on it. So that was something that's going to be coming out tomorrow on all the social media channels. You can follow them at rumble.com/Catholic Vote. You guys get the picture. They're a lot like me. They just went Catholic Vote everywhere, just like I do at Kyle Seraphin everywhere. Okay, well, in the vein of weird, and in the vein of this ongoing discussion, because I do want to kind of tie some of these things together about childless cat ladies and so on. I had one of those moments that you can only have when you're a parent just a few minutes ago. And I'm going to share it with you just because it's funny and not because of anything else. But we had a heavy, gross, cringeworthy show yesterday. All the clips and all the people, the white dudes for Kamala and the ladies that talk to us like little kids. Also, it's really weird that those people don't have little kids. One of the things that my wife and I were discussing is that maybe it works to talk to kids like they're little, foolish, retarded people. But they also are little sponges, and they absorb all the things that are going on around them. And maybe more importantly, they know that you're talking to them differently than other people. And so it's probably the reason that my 7-year-old talks like she's 20, because I talk to her like a peer, even though I'm in charge. And I had the first little inkling of how weird that is with my 11-month-old, who is not quite walking. She's not even a year old yet, and she's obviously not talking. She kind of babbles and responds sometimes right now. But it's one of those moments that you get to see as a parent that you don't if you're not a parent. You just never are going to be there because they're intermittent and you can't plan them. They just happen, and the context is so fun. And it's weird. It's truly weird. So there's this joke about AI. And it's like the husband tells the wife, hey, I'm really worried about AI. There's all these things that are going on, and all these different devices are more and more smart. And there's Alexa, and there's whatever, these kind of things, the spyware that we play. There's Siri. And the wife goes, oh, yeah, but it's okay. That's why we have all this stuff. They had talk about something about guns. And then the husband laughs, and then the wife laughs, and then the toaster laughs. And then the husband shoots the toaster. And I had that exact same moment, except with my now almost toddler, where I said something to my wife. She started laughing. I started laughing. And then the baby, weirdly, did this sort of like canned laugh. She was trying to join the conversation. It is weird. You can only have that kind of moment when you're a parent. And I don't know why it was so funny, but she also apparently has been mimicking my facial expressions. And I must look at my daughter like this a lot, like with this really grimaced face. So she gives me a look that nobody else gets. She'll look over at me and then she goes, and her teeth are showing and her eyes are squinty. She looks nuts. And it's just kind of special. You can't have that otherwise. What's weird is, and I'm going to use the word weird intentionally again, we've got a lady in charge of basically stepping into the White House now. She's kind of stepped into Joe Biden's shoes. She's trying to take the center stage, and Joe Biden seems to be phasing out. I've got a little clip from Veep that's going to make us kind of laugh about that, and then also kind of cry, and then also want to shoot the toaster. She's kind of Dr. Seussy, isn't she? She's childish, but she's never had kids. And I find that oftentimes people that don't have children baby talk to kids because they don't know, and they also baby talk to adults when they grow up. And they're like Kamala Harris. And I guess a lot of this came down to looking at something in the New York Post, and I realized I don't know enough about Kamala Harris as a person and the way that she's formed. It's one of the things that we always do. We always do that on our interviews when we come here. The first thing I ask is, where are you from and where did you grow up? I want to know the lens that you look at the world. And although I have kind of this instinct because Kamala's been around as a vice president and I knew kind of peripherally she was an AG in California, I didn't actually go look into the storyline chronologically and how and why. So I've done a little bit of that. But before we do that, as I promised, I had a very ugly, cringy show yesterday. Actually, George Hill listened to it and he didn't give me any context. I was at the sporting goods store and he sent me a text message that just said, "I hate you." And I was like, oh, what's wrong with George? And then he just wrote, "podcast." And so then I realized he also had to suffer through the cringiness. So we're going to have a little bit more fun with today. It is a weird Wednesday, so we're going to enjoy it. We're going to take this thing in not a very serious way, even though these are some very serious topics. And so here is Kamala Harris impersonator doing Kamala Harris brainstorms. And shockingly, it actually sounds an awful lot like actual Kamala Harris. And maybe this is the way she thinks, because this is kind of the way she talks.
I'll be running for president of the United States. And we have states. And they're united. And because think about it. States should be united. And all the states now, well, they have a president to preside over them. Oh, that's good.
Is it good? That lady sounds a lot like real Kamala. And so let's kind of dig into, who is this person? Why does she talk like this? How did she come up? Is she a serious person? I went to lefty-leaning Wikipedia, but also I started off here. This is what I saw this morning. Kamala Harris's much older lover gave her a BMW, a salary-boosting job, as she climbed Democratic Party ranks. Now, of course, we're talking about Democratic California kingmaker Willie Brown. I'll read a couple little quotes out of here because I think some of them are actually really fun. Let's see. She was a young prosecutor, and then she was given sort of lavish gifts. Anyone getting a BMW in the 90s from their boyfriend, you know, they were being taken care of, taken on trips to Paris, to the Oscars. A much older, younger lover, rather. How much older? He was 60 years old, and she was 29. Which even today is really not that normal. This is coming from journalist Dean Moraine's book called Kamala's Way. It's kind of a play on Kamala's book. And it says, over the course of the relationship, Willie Brown, gave Harris a BMW, traveled with him to Paris, attended the Academy Awards, took her on business trips to Boston, where he was meeting with Donald Trump, according to the 2021 book. It was a well-known relationship in San Francisco. The San Francisco Chronicle described it as the speaker's new steady, and the Los Angeles Times referred to the Harris-Brown thing as a frequent companionship. Okay, so there's that. What's interesting is Willie Brown, who is now 90 years old because Kamala is nearly 60, has taken credit for helping her rise in the Democrat Party. And he says, yes, we dated. And yes, I may have influenced her career by appointing her to 2 state commissions when I was the Assembly Speaker. And I certainly helped her with her first race for district attorney in San Francisco. And that made me think, all right. Well, I know the Willie Brown thing. What do I not know? So I went to the ever trusty Wikipedia to look into a little bit of her personal story. And some of it is actually kind of illuminating. I've heard people make ruminations and sort of talk about how she has a connection to Canada. So you go to this little section called Early Life. She was born in Oakland, which is what I believed, and I had that instinct. She was there. She was born in 1964, and her family left in 1966. They came back to California in 1970. So at 6 years old, 5.5 years old. Yeah, I've got a 5.5-year-old right now. I understand that she's not formed by the time that we lived in New Mexico or the time in Virginia, even if she has some faint recollection of it. So I'm on board so far. I'm tracking that. But then she moved. And she moved to Canada. She went to Montreal. And she went to high school there. She graduated high school the year I was born. And then she spent time in college for at least 1 year of that, maybe a year and a half from what I can tell, and then ended up at Howard. And then she's kind of been on this trip to be this black activist person because she went to Howard. And so she kind of embraced one side versus the other. But it's kind of interesting to note. Also, it sounds like her mom was kind of an activist, and that they claimed that her childhood was formed with surrounded African-American intellectuals and civil rights advocates. And so that was the formative sort of thought process that went into it. And then you go through her political career. She was a district attorney and a deputy district attorney. And then she ends up running for office, becomes district attorney, so on and so forth. From 2002, so for the last 22 years, she was the district attorney for San Francisco and then stepped her way up, eventually running for California AG. That was 2011 to 2017. I want to know these kind of things because I just didn't. She was in the Senate, which we know for that, like not even a full term, 2017 to 21, and was tapped. She decided to run for president after 1/3 of a term in the Senate, and then got picked up by Joe Biden as a DEI hire, which you're not allowed to talk about. Although she was definitely a DEI hire because Biden said he was going to hire someone based on DEI type principles. So her national standing is actually relatively short, and being a senator, even though it is a national office, it's really kind of a state office, right? It used to supposed to be represent the state houses. So all that was kind of interesting to me just because I'm just digging through this kind of stuff. And we start thinking she's been one heartbeat away from an almost dead president for quite a while, has she not? So is there a real possibility that in order to make this contest more fair, and in order to solidify himself as a man who created and allowed the first female president of the United States, because you could see Joe Biden wanting to take that title, she's used to getting kind of favors from older men, like quite a bit older men, like 20 to 30 years older men. Is there a possibility that Joe Biden just steps aside before any presidential debate so that it is a more even contest? A Donald Trump, former president, a Kamala Harris, current president, despite the fact that she hasn't earned that office, and nor should she be in it, and nor are the polls really going her way. I think that's a real possibility. So we're gonna play a little clip from the show Veep, which I have to imagine, in addition to doing the brainstorming that you heard earlier, this moment may have played out, maybe not with the beta male crying, but something very similar to this, because she's already done one coup and taken over the nomination, even though Biden was supposed to be there. And if you guys watch social media, there are left-leaning influencers that were crying about this because they just really wanted this old doddering Joe to represent them. Is this actually playing out in a broom closet somewhere in the White House?
I'm going to be president.
Of course you are. I mean, there's always hope, man. We've got plenty of hope in this world.
No. I mean, POTUS is going to resign. And I'm about to become president of America. No. Oh, don't cry. Don't cry. Oh. Your nose is bleeding.
Isn't it weird when the goofy fiction is predicting the actual facts of our time? And that doesn't matter whether you go back to like '06 Idiocracy. I mean, these things seem prophetic. And I don't actually think that they're predictive programming. I think someone wrote it up thinking that it was totally ridiculous. And then the people that are ridiculous read it and were like, oh, that's actually like a pretty darn good idea. If Hollywood thinks it's good, we should do this. There's another little story, and I don't usually do two in a row from the same outlet, but this one was so, I don't know, interesting, gross, appalling, weird, that I wanted to dive down this rabbit hole as well. It's another one from the New York Post. It says, meet Kamala Harris's niece, Mina. Mina is the name of the nice, pretty voiced elephant in the Sing movies and Sing 2, because my kids like that. That's the only name. I think when I hear Mina, I think of an elephant. She's a media executive and a children's author. Of course she is, because of course she is, who is producing Dylan Mulvaney's new show, which is called Fag Hag. I didn't name it. He did. And this is a piece written by Diana Glebova, who is a writer at the New York Post. And here we go. It's like, these are some of the people there. She's Stanford educated and a Harvard educated lawyer. She's 39 years old. And she's producing this thing for Dylan Mulvaney. Now, some of the stuff about it is, if you saw my social media earlier this morning, she claims to have a super close relationship, that's her words, super close, with Kamala Harris, her aunt. And this is the part that I highlighted. In her most recent project, she is backing the transgender social media star Dylan Mulvaney one-man show. I'm sorry, they say one-woman show, called Fag Hag. The show, which premieres this week at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in the UK, we're going to talk more UK stuff a little bit later too, is described as, quote, an ex-twink tries on a new label for size as she navigates dating, delusion, and God through storytelling, stand-up, and a musical number or two. That sounds like a great place to go and lose your lunch, just to go and vomit. Now, Mulvaney is not very marketable. I don't know why this is a thing. I guess that's why it's at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. But he was responsible for losing like $1.4 billion in Bud Light when they made that custom can. Anyway, this kind of talks about sort of the nastiness of that human being. I just wanted to reflect on how cynical and how radical you have to be for these types of people to be in your orbit. And that cynicism doesn't fall that far away, because just like the other female that ran against Donald Trump, Kamala Harris has, one, a nasty, ugly, gross laugh. She's incredibly disingenuous. She does feel like AstroTurf type people. And AstroTurf means that it's not grassroots that are backing her up. It's a bunch of people that are either paid or otherwise incentivized, or they are propped up. The idea of an algorithmic information op is something that we should probably talk about. And I actually think it's really the thing that happens more often than not. There's always this question like, oh, who's paying you for this? That's actually not the question you should be asking when you're looking at social media boosts that some people have. I have a lot of people come at me and they're like, you're being paid by the FBI. It's like, you know what? Piss off. We're going to talk about the National Whistleblower Appreciation Day, which happened yesterday without fanfare in my house. But people can do something that is ignorant, foolish, cynical, ridiculous. The difference is whether or not other people see it. And there are some people whose profile is high enough that it's going to be seen either way. There's also the possibility that there is some behind the scenes string being played, because we're all getting sort of manipulated at the attention span level. And that is really obvious to you. If you go turn on anything from a YouTube to an Instagram, it is going to feed you things that it thinks you're going to sit and watch. And so that can be the information op part of it. It doesn't actually have to be the person who creates the content or has some false story or has some hot take that's kind of ugly. The fact that it's getting promoted and you happen to see it is where you should be focusing. Why is this running wild across either social media or in the mainstream media news cycle? That's the thing that I always want to know. I want to look one layer deeper. Of course, people are going to consume what is thrown in front of them. If you walk by a television in the airport lobby, you might sit and watch CNN for a few minutes. But what's interesting is that it's actually in the airport lobby, and that's where CNN is. And why is that? Because they bought a bunch of captive audiences and they put it on those televisions. So the information op is looking one step further, not the information itself, but why is it being promoted and why am I seeing it? And that's what I want you to consider as you look at some of this stuff. And so, in a non-cringy way, let's talk about the funniest, saddest thing. Again, Hillary Clinton is the analog historically, now 8 years back. Trump, who has a history of sexist attacks, again faces a female opponent. This is the article that comes from the Washington Post. They have to go back to the well. Racism and sexism are their favorite. In fact, they mentioned both of those things. Strategies and aides from both parties are going for an election steeped in allegations of sexism and racism. Very, very funny. Every time that I see Hillary Clinton, I think of what an unlikable person she was. Kamala Harris is equally unlikable. And so all the claims that she's basically like Hillary Clinton with a tan, I think they line up. The thing that's also worth exposing, because I don't know if people just are ignorant and they just want to hear what they hear, but I listened to a speech that had her the other day. We're going to play it side by side, a Hillary Clinton speech. So I'm sorry, we're not done with the cringe. We just have a much lighter dose of it. The interesting thing is that she has this vocal tone that we often see Democrats put on, an affectation, if you will, to connect with certain voters, either in the South or black Southerners. And I don't understand it. Now, I'm guilty of being outside of Texas and sounding less Texan, coming back to Texas and sounding more Texan, especially as I acclimate, because it rings true to my hearing. But I was raised in Texas. I mean, I went to high school here. I came back and lived here a little bit afterwards, and I've taken my family. I've moved to Texas 7 times in my life. So I've spent a lot of time in Texas. And so a lot of that stuff comes fairly naturally, although there is some sort of instinct to sort of adapt, especially when you've moved around a lot. But I don't think you can say that when you pop in for a speech in Atlanta for a night. I don't think. This particular article wants to hone in on the fact that that Trump mocked Hillary Clinton's face. We talked about cringy faces and doing this with an infant. It is the weirdest face. Hillary Clinton's face looks plastic. It looks mockable every time I see it. And it's not because she's a woman. It's because she's a horrible woman. So this is the thing that they led this off with. It says, running against the former Hewlett-Packard chief, they made fun of Carly Fioroni, who actually had a lot of facial surgery. He says, look at that face. Would anyone vote for that face? The answer was no. It turned out he was actually correct. And then the same thing with Hillary Clinton. He dismissed her as unbalanced, unhinged, questioned her strength and her stamina. Well, that was reasonable. If you recall what was going on with Hillary Clinton at the time, she was fainting and falling over, and she seemed really sick and sickly during that campaign. Apparently, she's come back from it. No one knows what. Maybe she was the original Typhoid Mary of the COVID spreaders. He referred to Nikki Haley as a bird brain. I've heard Nikki Haley speak. So have you. I would actually call her a war boner. She's a walking war boner. I don't like that either, which is why I don't like Lindsey Graham. In any case, this is not sexism. Calling someone dumb as a rock and lying Kamala or laughing Kamala Harris, like they all line up with the way that she actually behaves in real life. So I'm going to play you this kind of cringeworthy clip that shows you that affectation that these people put on. They're not genuine. And it's really obvious. The thing that I've noticed about Donald Trump, though, say what you like about the guy, and people love him and people don't like him. They hate him. And then some people just kind of feel ambivalent. Like there's things I like about Trump. There's things that I don't. I will never say that Donald Trump is fake Donald Trump. In fact, he's very Donald Trump pretty much all the time. I rarely see him go into a place where he is now playing to an audience in a way that doesn't seem like the way that he would actually act. But Hillary and Kamala, they do it all the time. And here's a really neat little mashup of it. Listen to the Kamala at the end. I mean, the Hillary Clinton thing. I've never heard Hillary Clinton talk like this, but she did used to do this when her husband was running for office and when he was in the office. She was completely fake. Here's a little taste.
I don't feel no ways tired. I come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy. I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me.
And you all helped us win in 2020, and we're going to do it again in 2024.
And we're going to do it again. Does she ever talk like that? You were born in Oakland and you were raised in Canada? What is going on there? She doesn't drop off those little things. They all want to be a black preacher from somewhere in Atlanta. And they think somehow that if you sound like the people, even though you don't look like the people, even though your values don't align with what those people sound like, that you're somehow going to be accepted. And sadly, because you're in a fairly friendly audience, they actually think that landed. I heard it without any commentary. It didn't say anything. Like I didn't see it originally with that side by side. I just listened to it and I went, what a fake. What an absolute fraud she is. Trump is always Trump. You can't help it. Even when I don't like it. Sometimes he says things that are kind of weird. Here's a little kind of taste of that. I don't think this is actually the wrong thing to say, because it is. He did say something that was kind of strange. He said Christians are never going to have to vote again, or they don't have to worry about voting again as long as they vote for him in 24. Weird. But Donald comes off the right off the top of the cuff. He just says things and then he thinks about them later, or maybe he doesn't think about them ever. This is a little piece coming out of the MSNBC opinion column. A woman named Sarah Posner wrote this. Why Trump targeted Christians with his darkest promise yet, which they took to be you'll not have to vote again, means he's going to take over and be a dictator. Sure. The most definitive statement to date of his intention to implement the Christian nationalist autocracy sought by his most ardent believers. It's interesting they use the word believers there, not supporters. Anyway, he says, look, you got to vote for me and it'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. You won't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you won't have to vote. I would focus in on the word have to vote. The idea is right now that you have to vote because without it, we're not going to be able to overwhelm something evil that's happening. And I think that's actually not a terrible take. However, phrasing is pretty awful. It's not good. It's the most definitive statement yet about his intention to implement the Christian nationalist autocracy sought by his ardent believers. Something about that just doesn't ever seem right. Does that sound even close to a Donald Trump to you? He's going to do Christian nationalist autocracy. He's not an autocrat. It's not the way that he functions. It doesn't make any sense. That doesn't stop them from saying things. They don't care about what's true or what's real. And they actually, the left is always playing to what they think is going to resonate. And it kind of brought me in a roundabout way and kind of a long form route to this story yesterday about it being National Whistleblower Appreciation. I can't even get it out. It's so dumb. I've got the email that came out to all FBI, all DOJ employees from Lisa Monaco, who is nasty, who is gross. I do have a picture of her, which I will show you in a second. She is really the power behind the throne that has been driving a lot of the weaponization. Don't just take it from me. That's the things that Kash Patel has also shared with me. Personally, when we've talked about it, we all have this instinct that there are people behind Merrick Garland that run this stuff. And they're equally ideologically aligned. They're just not the faces for public consumption. But if you ever do see a press conference with Merrick Garland talking, he's the AG, the assistant AG behind, the deputy attorney general rather, the DAG, she's always waiting to speak because she just wants to talk. She knows that she's the one who's actually running this stuff. And so we're going to kind of talk a little bit about that. Let me do a quick little plug for my friends over at Mad Hat Jerky. You guys can get yourself a snack. We're halfway through the show. Maybe you need a little power up. And if you need to, yes, it is sitting on my desk. This is my last bag right now. I have to reorder of roasted garlic. It's a little bit spicier. It's the one I can keep from my kids because they don't like spicy. MattHatJerky.com/Kyle. Matt Hat, Hat, jerky.com/Kyle and use the promo code Kyle to save yourself 20%. You can also use the promo code BUYNOW, BUYNOW. You might save 30%. So give that a shot if you want. But make sure you go through our code or our website address, matthatjerky.com/Kyle. We'll get credit for the sale. And then if I can save you another 10%, I will. I don't care if you use my name or not. If you try buy now, maybe you'll get it. In any case, because they send me emails all the time, just like they send you once you guys, like any other company that you've worked with, they just want to send you all this stuff. It's good meat. USDA Prime stuff. You guys should check it. Okay. Here's this little letter. I want to read some of it because it's pretty gnarly. And God, it's so fake. All right. A message from the Deputy Assistant Attorney General on National Whistleblower Appreciation Day. Dear colleagues, are we really colleagues? I used to get these emails, by the way. So thank you for folks inside the FBI for sharing it with me. Whistleblowers perform an important service in the Department of Justice, the federal government, and the public. By coming forward with evidence of waste, fraud, abuse, misconduct, whistleblowers improve government operations and strengthen the public's trust in the institution. They talk about the implementation since 2013 of whistleblower protection. They talk about the statute, which is 5 U.S.C. 2302. She forgot to say that 2303 is the statute that actually covers the FBI because they don't care. Because they don't care. I actually argued in court in legal filings with an FBI attorney. And one of the things they said is that 5 U.S.C. 2302 does not cover the FBI. And we're like, yeah, no kidding. FBI is its own statute, 2303. So they're willing to lie and they're willing to misinform even the members of their own employment. It says all DOJ employees and contractors and subcontractors and guarantees and so on are protected from retaliation for making protected disclosures. Today, the second half of the show, we're going to talk about how this is fake. But I will tell you the most important thing about whistleblowers. If you come forward and you work for the federal government, particularly if you work for the DOJ, in any of the entities, whether it's DEA, ATF, FBI, what you have done is shown who they need to crush. And Garrett and I agree on this 100%. It is important. They do appreciate whistleblowers because they want to know who is going to dissent within the ranks. The strange thing is that they've announced whistleblower protection programs and so on and enforcement initiatives. Everybody hears that term and they think someone who's calling out government malfeasance. And that's not what the FBI or the DOJ actually mean by whistleblower protection. What they mean is somebody that is going to come forward in private industry and allow the DOJ to pick up a new case. They want someone to come forward and say, hey, I think I'm working at this place called Enron, and we're actually working with the accounting firm, and I think that they're cooking the books. There's a financial incentive, according to federal law, that will allow you to be rewarded. There's no reward for being a government whistleblower. If you blow the whistle on government malfeasance, fraud, waste, abuse, inappropriate behaviors, like I did, actually, I was talking to a member of Congress yesterday and shared directly. It's like, look, if you want to know some fun things about Deputy Director Paul Abate, including his sexual misconduct, let me know. I've got it. You guys should be investigating it. You guys should be calling it out. Knock yourself out. The fact of the matter is that government whistleblowers get absolutely smashed because there's no financial incentive, there is no reward structure, and there's no incentive for the government. The incentive for the government only exists in private sector whistleblowers, which means there is a place for enforcement action. And that's what they're talking about. So they'll speak in these sort of twisted terms. I've got actually a video of Chris Wray doing something real similar. These people are not talking to you in good faith. And it's really important to know that. Let's see. I've got a video. It's called Lies to Congress. So that must be it. So Chris Wray, a lot of people have said he lied in front of Congress. And I want to kind of show you how these people shade the truth. DOJ, excited about whistleblower initiatives? Yes, as long as it's private sector. If you're an actual DOJ whistleblower coming forward, we want to crush you because you are now making us look bad. In the same way, one of the things that is done, and this is how someone like the Deputy Attorney General, Lisa Monaco, can run things. It's the reason why that Deputy Director of the FBI has the actual information, and we keep putting Chris Wray up there on the stand, or we put him out in front of Congress for hearings, and he doesn't know things. It is by design. He is ignorant on purpose. They set him up to not know the truth so he can deliver political messaging, which he does. And the real information, he's not lying if he didn't know the truth in the first place. Now, in the early days after the Butler attack on July the 13th, there was questions. Was there a teleprompter that had exploded? Because the shot, to the ear, that is a really, really near miss. Sorry. It's a hit, but it's a near miss of the head. Steve Friend and I did this whole thing about George Carlin talking about the airline industry and near misses and near hits and so on. In any case, the question was something shattered? Was it a teleprompter? Was it glass? Or was it a bullet? And that was pretty easily debunked. It was like, okay, the teleprompters were still in place. You could see pictures of them after the fact. It was a bullet. That was obvious to the FBI. Chris Wray intentionally remains in the dark so he can give this testimony. And then you bring forward someone like Paul Abate, and it looks like he's contradicting his boss. But what he's doing is showing who actually knows what's going on in these agencies. And Chris Wray is not the guy. When I was working for the Bureau, what they would say is, and Chris Wray said it himself, he said, I'm bubble wrapped. Like they insulate me from the people that actually work in the FBI. And he's also dropped it even on things like Fox News when he talks to Brett Baer saying, I have oversight of the FBI. But he never says I have management authority or leadership at the FBI because he doesn't. The deputy director is always the power behind the throne, and that's the same thing in the DOJ. That's why your eyes do not need to be on a Merrick Garland, and getting rid of him does nothing. The deep state are the people that have been there for 20 or 30 years and have spent all their time getting into position. Look at this. Look at the position. On the screen right now, you're seeing Barack Obama sitting on the desk, and Lisa Monaco is telling him what's up. She's gesticulating with her hands. By the way, she's put on some weight since then. Being in that position of power is not good for them physically. They look awful. She's gained probably like 20 or 30 pounds. But the fact of the matter is the lies are not necessarily lies if the other person is actually intentionally ignorant. And this is kind of a little taste of it. I want you guys to see this.
There's some question about whether or not it's a bullet or shrapnel that hit his ear.
Senator, there is absolutely no doubt in the FBI's mind whether former President Trump was hit with a bullet and wounded in the ear. No doubt, there never has been.
Okay, there never has been from the people that did the investigation. What that tells you is not that Chris Wray came out and lied. It's that he's deliberately not keeping up with this stuff, and he's only going to know the things that the deputy director feeds him from that investigation. Does that make sense to you? Because this is how it works. The director only knows what's going in the FBI based on what's called the director's daily briefing. It's similar to what the president gets. It's like, here's a survey of all the intelligence and all the different things. You need to know these things. Here's some news clippings. Here's some articles. That's why when he says, Kyle Seraphin, I'm familiar with the name, it means that he's been briefed on what I'm doing by someone else. It's not like he went out there and looked up oh, I better see who Kyle Seraphin is. He's talking a bunch of smack against the FBI. That's not what goes on. He was presented with some information, and so he knows with what he was presented on purpose. And the rest of it, it's blinders. So that when the DD comes in and says, okay, I actually know what's going on, and there was never any question about it because we knew right away because we just looked and saw the teleprompters were there. The FBI was on scene very shortly thereafter. That is the cover-up. The cover-up is putting people out in front of you that intentionally don't know what's going on. Hopefully that is fairly clear, and it makes some sense. There's another thing that got played out, and it keeps getting played out. I saw this right away when Chris Wray went and talked about it, and I know it's important because the deputy director is on board as well. When the two of them are in line and they both have the same talking points, we know this is a talking point that is relevant for, when you said in the chat, the blob, Mike Benz's term for this sort of deep state, administrative state. They want more power and authority. No government is rewarded for shrinking itself. They are perversely incentivized. So here is Lindsey Graham. I found this little clip. I thought it was interesting. He's taking a shot at Kamala, as he should if he's actually a Republican. And this is an interesting little piece. I also want to discredit Lindsey Graham because I think that he is a sniveling, disgusting weasel. And on top of that, the amount of sucking off of the intelligence community that we saw yesterday when he was out talking to Paul Abate, deputy director of the FBI, was borderline pornographic. And I'm going to have to show it to you. So we'll just put a content warning up front there. Now you've heard it. All right. Here he is making a interesting line of attack on Kamala. I think all we have to say is that Kamala has to own everything that the Biden administration did, including this.
She never talked to the governor of Arizona or Texas, only talked to the border chief one time. And she said that she was the last person in the room to talk to President Biden before he decided to withdraw from Afghanistan. If that's true, then she owns it as much as Biden.
It's interesting for two reasons. One, that was on CNN, so they're allowing him time on CNN. The reason that the Democrats are willing to give Lindsey Graham time on CNN is because he's functionally a Democrat in all ways. One of you just said, Russ Hawk just said he's a childless cat lady too. He is, and he's gnarly. The real story of Lindsey Graham, for me, goes to an episode we did called The Kansas City Shuffle. And if you guys remember, the movie Lucky Number 11 does a good play out on this, a long-form Kansas City Shuffle. But essentially, in layman's terms and in simplest terms, a Kansas City Shuffle is the mark of a con game, a confidence game, is going to be scammed. And the way that they scam you is not by making you think that you're playing an honest game. They make you know that the game is rigged, but they pretend that the game is something that it is not. So you believe that you understand what the scam is, and that is the actual scam. If you walk in and you're like, they're palming the ball, but the fact of the matter is there was no ball to begin with, then that is the scam. They've made you believe that at least you could beat it if you understood what they were trying to do to trick you. But the trick is thinking that you were ever going to get there, or that there was you're being scammed, but you're being scammed in a different way. So there it is. Lindsey Graham actually did this, and we have to play it because this is the real scam of what's going on in Butler, PA. This is my take on it. Some of you guys don't like it. That's fine. I actually think that incompetence was the cause. I actually think that this was probably not the first time that this would have happened. It's just the first time that someone actually tested them. When you work in the federal government and you see and you hear people from the SWAT team saying, listen, we didn't have Secret Service show up and they didn't use our radios and we had no comms. And so we were trying to deconflict through some admin that was sitting in a trailer somewhere and they didn't get real-time information that we were sending out. And so it took 20 minutes to do something that should have taken 90 seconds or less. That sounds so plausible and so believable because I've seen it over and over and over again. The worst radio operators in the country in law enforcement work for the federal government, and they do federal agency work. Period. I remember I had a radio, and I was always in the radio room, and they knew me by name at the Washington Field radio office. There were like 1,000 agents working out of that agency. And when I would go in there, they knew me by name. They were like, "What's up, Kyle? What can we do for you? What do you need?" I'm like, "Hey, can I get an antenna for this? Hey, can I get a battery pack for this? Can I get some adapters? Can I get some earpieces?" And they always took care of me because I was the only dude that I knew that gave a rat's about doing that job. I was also the only person that I knew that knew how to program the radios, and they are massively functional law enforcement radios. They cost close to $10,000, somewhere between like $6,000 and $10,000, depending on the package we had. They had 160 channels, all encrypted and non-encrypted. We had every public service you can imagine, down to we had the garbage truck frequencies for all the folks that were working in DC. Because if I wanted to know what was going on in a neighborhood, I would punch the scan button and it would scan all the frequencies. And so I would know this is what DC Metro is saying in this precinct. This is what they're saying in another precinct that's adjacent. This is what they're saying in another one. This is what Virginia law enforcement is saying that's on the other side of the bridge from where we're at right now. This is U.S. Park Police that is doing enforcement operations. This is the Transit Authority, Coast Guard frequencies, you name it. We had everything. And I was the only one that I knew in the FBI sitting there that knew how to do it and cared. Nobody sat through training for radios. So the idea that the Secret Service went and looked at a radio and was like, "Nah, I'm not interested. I'm not going to learn how to do this. I'm not going to carry their radio. I don't want to carry 2 radios and have to give it back." That was the other thing. Dude, give me all the comms. Always. Comms win wars. It's my belief that total incompetence was the answer, but that's not the game that's being played on you right now. That's not the Kansas City shuffle. We can obviously see an end towards gun control, which has been brought up and transparently brought up by all those on the political left. Swalwell did it. Jayapal did it. A couple of others did it in front of Chris Wray, talking about, we need to get rid of assault weapons. That's the obvious take. This is the more insidious take. Here's Lindsey Graham saying, your privacy, it's only important up to a point, but the deep state actually has more authority and their goals are more important than your privacy. This should shock you. And if he's your senator, you need to get this man out of office.
That were encrypted?
I think we've experienced a range of returns on this. Some of the applications that he was using online were encrypted in nature. Some of the email accounts.
Have we broken into them?
We've received returns. There are some that we have not been able to get information back because of their encrypted nature.
Is there any way to solve that problem?
Senator, we've talked about this before. We need a solution that provides lawful access to law enforcement.
So you're telling me the guy that took 8 shots at the president, former president, has apps that we can't get into that may, if you could get into, reveal some relevant information?
That is correct, Senator.
So if he were talking to some foreign power, and I don't think any foreign power would hire this guy, by the way, so I'm not overly worried this was some great plot by the Iranians because they couldn't even think of this. However, there could come a day where something like this is very important. How do we solve this problem?
Senator, as we've been saying, we need a solution that provides lawful access where when we go to a company...
You're telling me, I agree with you, I'm not blaming you. We have encrypted apps of an assassin, a murderer, and we can't get into them all these days after. That needs to be fixed, folks. I'm all for privacy, but to a point. What if, in the future, somebody's using these apps to communicate with a foreign power? I think we need to know these things. We need to know them in real time. So lessons learned is that everything failed.
We need to know what's in these apps, and we need to know it in real time. Do you know what in real time means? That means ongoing monitoring. This is a bill that was introduced. This is Senate Bill 4051. Lawful Access. You heard that term just a second ago. Lawful Access to Encrypted Data Act. Oh, and it was sponsored by Lindsey Graham. Well, that's interesting. And when was it introduced? 6/23/2020. Lindsey Graham, who has a chronic war boner and wants to send United States resources and money, treasure and blood and our children into conflict zones, also doesn't think that you have a right to privacy. Can someone tell me how this guy is not the most successful Democrat? Because I'm fairly confident he is. He is a plant that is infiltrated and gotten people to vote for him on this fake basis of being conservative. I'm all for privacy, but like up to a point. No, dummy. The point is you don't have any authority or actions to do this. If you guys saw our episode with Stephen Stambalia, the machine gun lawyer, we talked about one of the problems with requiring firearms to have serial numbers. And the issue with destroying a serial number presupposes that any gun that exists, all guns, will eventually be used in a crime, even though the stats do not bear it out. Most guns, the vast majority of guns, will never be used in a crime, just like most lawful use of encrypted apps will never be part of a crime. You don't break the technology simply because someone can abuse it. The example I always use is if you have the idea of a lock, you can use it to secure your family. You can use it to secure your possessions. You can use it to keep your kids out of a place where things are otherwise dangerous, like a safe, and children, if we want to talk about guns. You can also use it unlawfully to imprison somebody, but we don't destroy the technology of locks and issue the government a skeleton key, which was a big story when we found out that some safes had been cracked because the companies that built them were holding on to that key in abeyance and then gave it to the federal government when asked for it. We don't break the technology of security simply because someone can abuse it. On the rare or small chance that someone is going to get involved in terrorism or child pornography or take your pick, we don't ruin every single person's ability to tell their private thoughts to people in their lives. The government has no right to know this. This is a Fourth Amendment problem. This is also a Third Amendment problem because Steve Friend wrote about it, and I had never thought about it before. But the Quartering Act, one of the reasons why you wanted to quarter soldiers inside Americans' houses is so that they could keep an eye on what was going on in those houses. It was a search of sites, but it was a nested search where they actually put a embedded person. And in the same way, if the government is going to sit there and look at your encrypted data going back and forth, we know that they are not trustworthy. They should not be allowed to do this. They cannot be allowed to do this. And this lawful access expression, it's the same story. It was called going dark in the FBI going back to 2014 and Jim Comey. I will beat this drum over and over again. They are using this crisis, they being people on the left, including Lindsey Graham, who is essentially like an autocrat. You want to talk about totalitarianism, being able to monitor communications in real time that the government has no right to look in. This is an existential problem for American freedom. And I will die on that hill. Every time. I've got kind of a funny little clip here that should tell you that you're not cynical enough. This is something that we've traded around in the Suspendables chat group. Okay. We've punched this thing out and we've showed, like, end of the day, all the people that are out there thinking that there's this like vast government conspiracy and they're super brilliant and they're able to do all this stuff. Like, you can't tell me that you don't trust the government and you think the government does a crappy job at everything, but suddenly when it comes to doing conspiracies, they're the best. The default answer should always be stupidity. You don't have to be a shill for anything to realize that bad comms and a lack of basic skills that law enforcement should have and that the military would basically die without having are the issues that we have. And so here's a little clip that we've been passing around inside the Suspendables chat in the background. I don't know who to credit for sending this over to me, so it's one of my guys. But this is the mindset you should have. And most of you are the ones sitting around the table if you think that there was some sort of exciting conspiracy to kill Donald Trump. Incompetency almost always explains this stuff.
I guess you just don't realize how clueless the system really is. Yes, there's some shady shit going down, but trust me, it's fueled by stupidity. Look at yourselves. You know, you pass yourself off as cynical people, but you still have some faith in the system, don't you?
If you're cynical, the faith in the system has to be negated across the board. And that's my push for you. I have been listening to a little bit of J.D. Vance. The thing that Republicans lack is the spine to do things when they can. And so my conversation yesterday on National Whistleblower Appreciation Day, which was actually timely, and we're going to talk about the settlements real quickly in a second. I first want to set it up with this thought that Republicans do not do this. J.D. Vance has identified this. It's some of the things he says, even if he is not the greatest candidate as a VP, I would love to see this mindset pushed in. I know this mindset exists in people like Kash Patel, who do have access to Donald Trump. I want this to be pervasive in a White House. Ruthless exercise of power. the way the political left does. Listen to, he was attacked for this clip, by the way. I actually think he's spot on. This is actually the correct way to think.
I think the thing that we have to take away from the last 10 years is that we really need to be really ruthless when it comes to the exercise of power. I was talking about this with someone earlier today, where you remember there was some threat that congressional or Senate Republicans made. If you get rid of the filibuster, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And you actually look at it, it's like, oh, this is not that interesting.
We're going to actually deliver on our promises that we've made for decades.
Right.
Sounds
this is the threat. If you get rid of the filibuster, we're going to do this stuff. Like, they're talking about expanding the Supreme Court. They're talking about adding, 2 senators from heavily Democratic places.
You get rid of the filibuster, we'll actually deliver on defunding.
We'll do what the base has been telling us that we don't want to do.
Yeah.
That is exactly right, though. J.D. Vance is like, these people are making these weak threats. You guys said it in the chat, mean letters, sternly worded letters. None of those things are really important. What goes on in reality is the people that are subjugating our democratic process, our republic, and our federal government to the whims of the political left, they're not in fear of us. They're not in fear of Republicans, even though they act like they are, because they're all paid out. And here's probably the most important part of this story. This might be the most important part of today's show. This happened last week. It's not breaking news, but I'm going to give you a take on it that if you haven't thought about it, you need to. The Justice Department reached a $2 million settlement with 2 FBI officials whose text messages infuriated Trump. First of all, this was written by Politico, so it's BS. Infuriated Trump. How about actually engaged in what would look like a coup, treasonous behavior, and taking on responsibilities that don't exist within that agency? Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who were very deeply associated with Crossfire Hurricane, who have been excoriated across the way, they had a lawsuit saying that their privacy was violated because their text messages were shared. The text messages that were part of an actual investigation by the IG, an actual wrongdoing was assigned to them, and they were fired, like you'd expect. Now, every single person who works for the federal government has to sign up for using government equipment. There's an entire agreement. Every single department has it. I've read the one that I can find online for the Department of Interior. The DOJ's is very similar. And what it says is that you don't own any of the information on there. You have no right to privacy. You have no right to a search warrant. The government can come in and look at the things that are on government property, and they can look at the things that you use that are government owned at any time. Your text messages are all subject to record. They are all subject to being preserved. Your emails, they're the same, and that they can be perused or looked at any time by any internal investigation. There is no right to privacy when you work for the federal government. Unlike what Lindsey Graham would have you believe about your personal messages that you pay for and you decide to have an agreement with some outside third-party company that may or may not be in Europe, if you want to have an encrypted app, you have the right to that as an American. But when you work for the DOJ, you don't have that right, certainly not on your bureau phone. In fact, we were all cautioned, and I know Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were as well, because she was a lawyer and he was working as an agent. They tell you, be very cautious about talking about anything work-related on your personal phone, because it is now subject to discovery. If you talk about cases, if you talk about your work, it is now becoming a work product, and you have now introduced a liability into your personal privacy that you would otherwise have, because you're still a citizen. You now have introduced that into a space where we can actually go out there and search it when we have an investigation. You obviously have to be honest and tell people about this stuff. The DOJ agreed to pay them $2 million between the two of them. It's like a $1.2 million settlement and an $800,000 settlement. Page got $800,000. Peter Strzok, who obviously got treated worse. They said this is an outcome that is a critical step forward in addressing the government's unfair and highly politicized treatment of Pete. It is important for him. It vindicates the privacy interests of all government employees. F you, by the way. And it also continues, we're going to litigate his constitutional claims to ensure that in the future, public servants are protected from adverse employment actions motivated by partisan actions. I want to puke when I read this stuff. Let me read you this one. Fired FBI official. This is actually not new at all. This goes back to 2021. Fired FBI official Andy McCabe. He wins retirement benefits back and back pay in his settlement. Now, one of the things that's been kind of tossed around in the suspendables chat, and if you guys don't know this, basically he got all of his back pay, plus he got $1 million+ GoFundMe account, which raised $500,000 in a flippin' weekend. It took me a couple of weeks, if not more, to be able to raise money for two guys, $600,000, and I'm infinitely grateful, but the political right doesn't have nearly the apparatus that these assholes have behind theirs. There's no other way to say it. And Andy McCabe was the acting director while I was in. He was my former ADIC, so he was the assistant director in charge of the Washington field office at one point. All of this is really, really gnarly stuff. These settlements are something very specific. By the way, let me just show you a piece of the settlement because it's gross. This is the stipulations. I have the broader document, but the stipulations say he should also get the following benefits. The plaintiff wants FBI official credentials, badge, and time in service awards key mounted to the typically provided format provided to retiring FBI deputy directors and senior officials. Executive FBI credentials, as are typically provided to retiring FBI deputy directors and other senior executives. He also wants an identification card so that he can carry a firearm. Basically, it's an ID card that allows you to go out there and carry a firearm under LEOSA. And lastly, he wants senior executive service cufflinks. He wants to be given his retirement cufflinks. If I ever see somebody with retirement cufflinks from the FBI, the headbutt will probably be involuntary. I'm just going to say that right now. That's Andy McCabe. So McCabe, who actually leaked information to the media in violation of criminal law and also in violation of all FBI policy, who was fired for cause on purpose, who did the thing that Garrett O'Boyle is accused of doing, but we know for a fact that he didn't do because the thing they accused him of, I did. They're going to try to claim that this is all righteous. This is in defense of government employees. And I'm going to give you a different perspective. What you just saw, this one, specifically, these clowns, they just got paid off. That is the administrative state telling people like Peter Strzok, we got your back. We've got you. It might take us a little while, but you're going to be made whole. We're going to pay you out for whatever money you would have missed. $1.2 million, that's like 8 years' salary for him. So anything that you didn't get to retire with, we're going to give you the money. We're going to make sure and they're going to continue. There's no reason that DOJ needed to settle. DOJ could have taken this to the mat all the way through every federal court the same way that I'm going to have to sue and I'm going to get turned and we're going to have to go as far as we can go until a court says we're not interested in hearing this case anymore. But instead, they paid out Peter Strzok. This is a political payoff. And as I told a member of Congress yesterday, it's very simple. If you want to ever have whistleblowers come forward again, you need to at least do as good as the deep state has done to take care of their own by taking care of my friend Garrett O'Boyle and making sure that Marcus Allen, who was adjudicated as being correct, who was supposedly awarded 27 months of back pay, who has not received that back pay because the FBI is holding on to it as long as they can. They're going to try to starve him out. Luckily, we had money to send him, and I've already done that. It took us a year to be able to send money over to him that we had to raise privately. Because if he accepted that money, they would have said that he was fired for cause for accepting money. This is a protection racket, and they're protecting their own. It's like a guy going to jail and coming out, and suddenly like they give him money and car, and his wife and his family are taken care of while he's in the joint. Same story. That's what this $2 million settlement is. There was no reason to settle. There was no legal justification for it. They had no right to privacy. So this is fraudulent. And they're being paid out. All right? You have to know that this is happening. I want to get deeper into some other stuff. A couple more things out here because there are some big things that are happening in the world. Before we do that, let's say thanks to my buddies at Patriot Coolers. This is the kind of payout we got. We got a friend at Patriot Coolers who have been supporting our program, and we're really grateful to it. Patriot Coolers, this is mine with the Suspendables logo on it. Promo code Kyle, K-Y-L-E. Go to patriotcoolers.com. patriotcoolers with an S.com. You'll save 10% using our promo code. You'll support a good American company. You'll get an outstanding product. You won't feel bad about this. I have left these behind. I actually had to go and make the Blaze open up the studio, which was closed, and go find my cup that I left on the side of one of the tables because I had forgotten it, and I didn't want to drive out of Dallas without having my Patriot Coolers. I carry them everywhere I go. Anybody who's ever met me in any private setting has seen that these things travel with me. They're an outstanding tool. They really are. They're the best. And so patriotcoolers.com is where you can go get your own. I get the tumblers. We have all their products at this point. I got the backpacks. I got a soft cooler. Most of them I bought with my own money. Some of them they sent me when I just told them I was interested. They're like, and their shipping is super fast. It'll blow your mind. Like they'll send you something overnight and you'll be like, oh my God, I just ordered this and it comes in. So anyway, patriotcoolers.com, promo code KYLE, support them. Let me go into a couple of pieces of current news. This is actually going to be interesting because the Biden administration's got to own this too. Not only do they have to own the failure of what happened in Afghanistan, and I hope that Kamala is taken to task for that, and I hope that Trump does it. Live updates. Hamas political leader was killed in Tehran. You know, we don't know that Israel did it, but that's the expectation. So that's actually being covered out of the AP. That happened last night, overnight. And it's kind of a big deal because we haven't seen members of Hamas that have been basically running around as expats, collecting money and living a high life. This guy was out hanging out in Qatar. I guess he was attending a inauguration for the country's president. And you know what's not a good thing to do? Piss off Israel and then go into a place where they probably have the most penetration. And I guarantee they may not have a lot of people in Qatar or have the ability to go do that, but Iran, everybody's kind of cool with something bad happening there, and that's what happened. And then additionally, Iran also killed off one of the Hezbollah commanders, which is part of the terrorist organizations that operate there in Beirut. So you have two different strikes. Israel is doing some kinetic strikes. Look, all these people that get up there and they're like, the Jews run the world and all this other kind of stuff. I don't think that's true, but I'll tell you what. They do have a long arm, and they do have a pretty capable intelligence service. And if you piss them off, they don't have the same kind of leash as the United States does. So you've seen a couple of major figures in both Hamas and Hezbollah taken out in the last little bit. And that's not nothing. It means that we are a world that is in crisis. It's probably why this election matters as much as anything else for young people. Because if you don't want to go to war, this is why. And then the last little piece, and only because I read this, then I was like, oh, dude, I know somebody that was involved in this. And I reached out. And of course, I was correct. This actually is going on right now. You know, everyone thinks that we're not fighting in Iraq anymore. If you think that, you don't know much about how special operations work. We do have troops that are actively engaged in Iraq. And so the Pentagon just briefed out this, that they conducted, quote unquote, defensive airstrike south of Baghdad. There were the U.S. forces in Iraq conducted a defensive strike. And on this Babil province, they were targeting combatants attempting to launch essentially what are called like OWAUAS, which are just like one-way suicide drones. And my friend on the ground said that they had 6 enemy combatants that they took out. So this is an ongoing thing. The United States is involved in conflicts. We don't hate the idea of special operations doing it. That's what special ops guys sign up to do. This is their Super Bowl, and if you let them off the leash, they will do the job, especially when they're being targeted, which is what was going on there. They were targeting these folks, and our guys, took care of business, called in an airstrike, and eliminated some enemy combatants that were trying to do violence to our people. That being said, we are much more at risk of getting into larger conflicts, specifically because of the weakness that this administration is paying out right now. All right, yesterday, my wife told me that I did kind of a weaker job explaining what was happening in the UK and why it's such a big deal. In Southport, there was a stabbing. It was at a Taylor Swift dance class. So Taylor Swift was not involved, although that was the coverage. That's why people cared about it. I care about it because it was like 9 or 10 children that were stabbed, and as well as 2 adults that were in critical condition. 3 of those children have died. And the story was, who did the stabbing? It was a 17-year-old, and everyone kept saying over and over again, oh, the 17-year-old, he's from the UK, he lived in the UK, he was born in Cardiff. Like, they're trying to cover up the fact that he was actually the child of immigrants. And the question was it a Muslim country or was it somewhere else? In this case, it turns out it was Rwanda. So there was a lot of anger that was going on by regular men, and Tommy Robinson went out there and was like, look, what did you think people were going to do? You lied to them. The government actually, in the same way that we have the problems with what's going on in Butler, we expect the government to tell us honestly, and then we will deal with the information. But because the government was trying to censor the information to cover up for the immigrant communities, because they have some, agenda. The fact is, if you're a crappy immigrant and you come into this country, and even if you have parents that are here and you were born in this country and you're garbage, if you do some garbage thing, we are going to ask the questions. We have a right to do that. And so they lost their minds yesterday. And this is a little footage of what happened when the cops lie to the people. And the question is, have people in the West gotten sick of this? Have they gotten far enough? Or as Dan Bongino says, has it gotten bad enough? In some places, and particularly in this town, it looks like it's gotten bad enough for them to start getting kinetic. It happened in Dublin. It's now happening in the UK. Here it is. All right, there's obviously a lot more to that clip. I just wanted to get to the part where they throw what the Brits call a wheelie bin, which is a freaking huge trash can. That was like a 50-gallon trash can that someone got overhead. Those things are heavy, by the way, and they launched that sucker. I don't know if it was multiple people, but sent it. Look, I'm not into violence against cops, But I'm also not into cops that are enforcing things that are against the public's interest. And if you are a police officer, and they're seeing this in Venezuela as well, where cops are literally taking off their uniform, they're like, dude, I don't want to be associated with what they have asked me to do. If you are asked to do something that is illegal, immoral, or unethical, wherever you are, whatever country you're in, if you represent the official authority of the government and they are asking you to abuse that authority, it is your duty, it is your responsibility, it is your requirement as a decent human being to step away from that. That's what whistleblower appreciation should be. That we say, well done. That we look at Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. We look at guys who came out of retirement like George Hill and say, well done. You did the thing that we asked you to do and it cost you something and we want to make sure that you are made whole. That's what I was told by a member of Congress yesterday. We've mitigated those expectations. We do not expect to be made whole. But we also don't expect to see the deep state sycophants like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page paid out in a $2 million settlement. Because the deep state does take care of its own. That's why I hate taxes. I want to have a say in this. They took my money and your money and they gave it to some scumbag who hates America. And then the last little story here, because it's worth noting, the BBC were the ones that were lying about it yesterday. I had 3 different stories showing that they basically were more than happy to act like the person was not an immigrant to the country, was not some Islamic extremist that got involved in stabbing people at a preschool. The BBC always compromise. We're always questioning these people. And it's not surprising that people who sit in positions of power tend to abuse it when they abuse it against kids. I want to have their name out there and their face. Here it is. They call them presenters. This is Hugh Edwards. He was pled guilty to making indecent images of children, which is child pornography. Let's just call it what it is. This is the CBS reporting it. Listen, every major news network has had scumbags working for it. High-level presenters that are either sexually abusing women that are like being weird with men that are being weird with other men because they're homosexuals or they're closet homosexuals, or worst case scenario, they're going after kids. And in this case, he was targeting a teenager, which makes me think just a little bit about Willie Brown, because when Willie Brown was old enough to be doing things, when he was 30, Kamala Harris was born. And so that creepy instinct of people in power to go after those who are much younger, it is gross. It is the reason why, even if you have a sense of it, when you don't have children, when you have children, it's a little bit more intense. I'm just telling you, I'm not trying to be mean to anybody. And this is a good example of what's going on in the United States. This was a video my wife sent me. It's just another reminder. I do this thing. If you are a father, if you are a mother, it is your duty to do these things. You can't just send your kids out into the world and hope it's going to be okay. You actually have to be keeping an eye on them, especially when they're small. This video, and listen to the accent of the person that's actually in the bathroom here. This is an interesting little take.
This father perfectly demonstrated why parents shouldn't let their kids go to public bathrooms alone.
Let me go in there. Let me make sure nobody in here. Hello? See? There go man. There goes the man. You know this is the women's bathroom, right? Sorry. That's the women's bathroom. Man in the women's bathroom. That's why you gotta go in here with your kids. Let me make sure nobody else ain't in here. Let me make sure. So you gotta go in there with your kids. Make sure no man in the damn bathroom.
This father.
You gotta go in there with your kids and make sure there's no man in the damn bathroom. And do you hear him? He's like, sorry, so much sorry. Yeah. Really? And look, I don't even know if that was staged, but that's a real problem. That's a real thing, because people who are from other countries, they don't have the same standards as us. Maybe they don't care what it says on the bathroom sign. They're just going to go use it. I'm always armed when I'm out with my kids, always. And if you're in the women's bathroom and I come in there and there's a little kid walking in, probably going to have a weird chat. I'll just make you that promise real quick. All right, I got a little bit of lighthearted stuff because it's been a little bit heavy on some of these things. As I promised, we would do a little bit of fun. Here's a little funny thing. I used to work on Indian reservations. The word Indian is actually built into the federal statute. That's why it's used. It's not meant to be offensive. The federal government said it. They've been doing it for over 100 years. So the idea that you get to change the words, we're sick of DEI in this country. We're sick of a lot of this stuff. The West is getting fed up. Regular people are getting fed up. This is a little bit of a funny take. It's always people that have nothing to do with the reservation and don't actually live on the reservation. I've never seen people on reservations care about being called Indians. Never. It's always people that don't live on the reservation that are like trying to claim some heritage. It's Elizabeth Warren types that do. So here's a little funny little thing I found on Instagram, because I think you guys will get it. It's not offensive. It's legal statute.
Called me Native American instead of Indian because I'm not from India.
And I agree. I would rather be called Native than Native American
because the Americas was named after...
Oh my God, just shut the fuck up. Just shut up. All right, just shut up. It's a skill issue. You guys lost. We named football teams after you now. Deal with it.
We are so close to seeing people just say this everywhere. Like, you lost. It was a technology problem. It was a failure. End of discussion. In all of human history, conquest equals you're no longer in charge. So piss off. Okay. I got a 5-star review for you guys. And then I have something quite funny. I don't know why it made me laugh. If you guys watched Game of Thrones, you want to stick around for this last little palate cleanser here. So here is a 5-star review coming from Jeff Mech 71, coming from last month, podcast 5 stars. Hey, Kyle, I listen every day. Hey, thanks, Jeff Mech. Says, I first heard of you on the Dan Bongino show. I like what you had to say. Been listening since I found out you had a podcast. You always keep a level head and you present the information without coloring it. Too many are coloring it to swing their way. You present info and let us draw your own conclusions. Keep up the good work. Love your show. Thanks so much. I really, that is the goal, by the way. I will give you my opinion, but I'll tell you it's my opinion. And I do want to give the facts out there. And at the end of the day, it's called trust. You have to trust the audience. That's why I'll do interviews and ask people questions and I'll just let them talk. They just say their thing. I'll challenge them if I need to, but I don't need to give them my opinion beforehand. Okay, Game of Thrones was one of those things that was always funny. There were so many spoofs of it. There's so many ways to make it amusing. When you put it in the people in that accent and in our modern time, it's innately amusing. And here's yet another thing. This is the fun side of having kids and family. So we could all appreciate this. I think you guys will get a kick out of it. I don't know. I just started chuckling. It seems really wholesome. Also, the names that people have for grandparents, because grandparents don't want to be called grandpa or grandma because it makes them feel old. So they want to be called things like, in my house, my mother-in-law, she goes by Dee Dee. And it's like, your grandma. Like, I never had that when I was a kid. But it's a thing now. Grandparents always want different names. Yaya, Nana, whatever. Okay, so here's a little taste of fun stuff.
Queen Mommy, first of her name, mother of the crumb snatchers, Lady of the Soul Kingdom, planner of activities and protector of the realm. Your Grace. Coffee, my queen?
What is our standing?
In the realm of juggling duties, our strategy is to tend to 2 younglings whilst working from the confines of our own keep. We deploy every resource at our disposal, engaging the children in distractions, setting strict schedules, and enlisting any allies who can lend a hand. Although our household seems easy to defend, our army leaves a lot to be desired.
I've sent word to House Yaya for her support, but I cannot speak to her availability on such short notice. My Lady Mother is a reliable resource, but we shall inquire about poaching Gaga.
We already have declarations from Gaga's landing, but the timing is uncertain.
With King Dad Consort's acquiescence, I've already sent ravens to Uncle John's.
It appears that although we have enforcements in place, we may be left to our own devices. We navigate this challenging endeavor with the same resolve as any great campaign. Ever vigilant and resourceful.
Oh, don't.
Well,
The struggle is real if you work from home and you have kids. Actually, when I'm prepping the show, half the time I realize that my infant daughter is most interested in trying out her new singing voice, and she is constantly as loud as humanly possible. I can hear it no matter how many doors I have closed or what I have on my ears. So anyway, that is a real thing. All right, folks, go out there and be good neighbors, be good friends, be good parents, be good supporters of parents. If you are one of those support households that gets called on, I don't know what House Yaya is, but I like it. I assume that's some family member, like an aunt or an uncle. It's all good. All right, go out and do those things. And lastly, just be really, really aware that this meta coverage is what we do here. That's what we're always trying to do. I don't want to read the headlines. I want to look behind the headlines. I want to look sort of deeper. And getting paid off by the deep state is a real problem. All right, let's go out there and get rid of Lindsey Graham, shall we? We'll see you guys again tomorrow for another Kyle Seraphin show at 0930 Eastern Time. We'll be live on all of the places you see us. Thanks for joining us in the live chat. Appreciate it, you guys. See you then. God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.